first things to really get to grips with using Illustrator is the pen tool. In many ways, it's the pen tool that provides you with the opportunity to create all the shapes that you want in your illustration document. First thing is that the pen tool can move from one point to another, and as you can see, that's generally in a straight line. Click to a point, move to another point, click, 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 and when you go back to the beginning again, you can see that that little cross becomes a circle, which now says this is a closed path. I'm going to select all and then hit backspace, which will delete. Move from one point with the shift key pressed down, and you can only move either horizontally, vertically, or at a 45-degree angle. That can be really useful if you're trying to construct basic shapes. And as you'll see with a lot of Adobe software, if this point now lines up with the point above it, it tells you. So we can now go from there to there, again, to create a particular path. If I click, move to another point, and click, but this time don't let go and hold, now this is where the pen tool comes into its own, where it starts to enable you to construct curves. Again, if I hold the shift key down for the moment, these handlebars over here are constrained to working either horizontal or vertically. As I'm pulling down, the curve is moving upwards. And the way to think about it is it's almost like that there is a point between the upmost bar as it was raised up here and the top of the curve. It's as if that point is pulling the curve upwards. Go to another point, click and pull it higher, and you can see that the curve will also get higher, and we can keep on going with that. So it's like there's a point between here and this part. If we go in the opposite direction, so again this time I'm going to click and move upwards, you'll see that I'm producing a curve in the opposite direction. Each time we create a point, we're creating a point which has a series of anchor points, which means that we can come back to those points and manipulate them further. So if you see, if I use the direct selection tool here rather than the general selection tool, if I click on this anchor point, I now get these handlebars back, which means that I can start to manipulate the curve further by pulling it and reshaping it. If I twist it all the way around, you can see I can make all sorts of different kinds of curves. If I come back to the pen tool again, click and move in a diagonal position, you can see I can construct a more balanced, symmetrical curve. Each one of these is a path, and each path, once defined, can be manipulated. By selecting this particular path, I can change the size of it. I can change the nature of it. At the moment, my screen isn't showing you these symbols, but you can see here, now that I've clicked on it, we've got a variable width. If I come down further, you can see that I've got a kind of variable width which changes. Further still, and I've got a more kind of fixed width to that mark. Here I've got more of a pointed mark. So we can begin to manipulate this path in many sorts of ways. If I click on this path, not only have I got the ability to change the size, I can also change it to different kinds of marks. So here I can change it to like a charcoal mark. Here I can change it to a dividing mark, or even here this has been preset to allow me to create denim stitches. And you can actually create all sorts of brushes for yourself, customized brushes that will fit in here. There are brush menus, and you can find extra brush menus through here. So if we go show bristle brush, you can start to see the sort of definition of those brushes. So there's lots of different sort of hidden away brushes, and as I say, you can construct your own. Not only can you change the nature of the brush and obviously the size of it, you can change, so again if I change that to there, if I change the size of that, okay, you can see that brush mark is now becoming almost a kind of shape in its own right. I can change its colour. We have a fill and we have a stroke. So at the moment, if I change the stroke to that, obviously this changes, but also I can change its opacity. That becomes more evident when we move that over the top of something else. Finally, at the moment, it's not very clear or not easily seen. But over here, this is the fill setting. And it's white, so we didn't really notice the fact that there was a fill there. But if I give that a colour, what you'll see is that when I clicked from here to here, I created a fill because the computer was trying to work out the shortest distance between those 2 points. And certainly when you're using the pen tool to trace something, if the fill's on, then that can sometimes confuse you, because as you start to trace a shape, what you'll see is you're also starting to create a fill. And sometimes it can be a bit tricky working with that. So sometimes it's a really good idea, particularly when you're going to trace something, to switch the fill off first of all. And that can be done, as I say, very simply by either resetting the whole thing to black and white. So you can see at the moment that's a white setting. And again, if I click on there, you can see the fill comes up. And if I go to that cross sign, a bit like a no entry symbol, I've now got rid of the fill. And it's much easier, as I say, to create your shapes using this particular tool in this way. The next thing also to appreciate is that when you've created something with your pen tool, as I say, you've created a series of anchor points. If we look at that pen tool for the moment, we can add some more anchor points, and we can also delete some more anchor points. So if I hover over here and click on that, I've got rid of that anchor point. I've got rid of that anchor point. I've got rid of that one. The other thing is we can change the anchor point. If I click on here and I start to move that, I can start to curve that into a more rounded shape. So again, this particular tool is really, really useful in manipulating our drawing. And if we start to pull it out and it's sort of twisted round on itself, just gently move that back around this way. And again, you can start to define a shape. And it's this ability to create shapes, so I can take my direct selection tool, I can move that particular anchor point over to here. Now I can manipulate it further. So it's this ability to create shapes through a series of straight lines and curves that start to produce more sophistication to our illustration. So that's a very, very simple introduction to the pen tool.